have a fantastic set of panelists, as you can see there from the slides. And what I'm going to do is ask you guys to introduce yourselves when you answer questions, if you don't mind. I know the audience can see your titles there. So, wow, what a really interesting keynote, and we've had such great content already today. So it's quite a lot to unpick in our final session. Thinking about, we're going to start with talking about the future of work, or work of the future. And let me start with Aidan Mangtilo from the World Economic Forum. It's great to have the WEF with us, who have such a focus on the future of work and predict some big changes. So try and Aidan, can you bring it to life for us? What are you guys seeing at the WEF in terms of the work of the future, or future of work? What are some of the big trends we should be aware of?
Yeah, thank you, Barry, and it's great to be here with all of you to discuss this really important topic. So I just as a brief introduction, I lead on future work, or work of the future issues at the World Economic Forum, particularly an initiative called Preparing for the Future of Work that brings companies together to promote collaborative actions at scale on future work challenges, and also a community of chief human resource officers, so over 100 CHROs of leading multinational companies that works on these challenges from an HR perspective. We see 5 key trends at the moment, and 5 imperatives for companies associated with that. The first is an unprecedented double disruption to jobs arising from the COVID-19 economic crisis and the technological changes of the 4th industrial revolution. So we estimate that over the next 5 years, and this was published in our recent Future of Jobs report, 85 million jobs will be destroyed globally as a result of automation, and 97 million jobs will be created, notably tech jobs, green economy jobs, care economy jobs. So it's a net positive, but it implies huge disruption. And the imperative there is going to be to help people whose roles are at risk find pathways to new jobs and to support them through those transitions. The second key trend is around changes to skills, what we call a reskilling revolution. So with automation, even for people remaining within their existing roles, we estimate that some 44% of the skills required for those jobs will change on average over the next 5 years, and that over half of workers will need reskilling or upskilling. So I mean, that's obviously a huge challenge for companies. How do you incorporate that reskilling and upskilling alongside the day job? And I think it's also a big opportunity for outsourcing models, because companies are likely to have large unmet skills needs. So the imperative there for companies is to align technology and skills. Third big trend that we see is flexibility and agility. So a shift to remote work and now hybrid work models. 83% of companies expect to provide more remote work opportunities following COVID-19 than they did previously. And companies are restructuring for greater agility, including the creation of internal talent marketplaces and greater use of contracting. So 42% of companies expect to expand their use of contractors following COVID-19. So the imperative there is to transform organization and work design. Fourth key trend, a new emphasis on companies' responsibilities for the well-being of their people. Physical, financial, and I think with COVID-19 and the shift to remote work, mental well-being. 9 in 10 workers in the US said they were moderately to extremely stressed during the pandemic, and this has been a major focus of the CHROs that we work with. So the imperative there for companies is to promote total well-being. Fifth trend is need for new styles of leadership to align with these new ways of working. So empathetic, visible, communicative, and the imperative for companies there is to develop human-centric leadership. And then cutting across all of these, of course, is the need to embed diversity, equity, and inclusion. So the impact of COVID-19 was disproportionately felt by women, by young people, by minorities, and we're at risk of seeing the major gains that have been made there over recent years roll back if companies don't re-emphasize DE&I. So this is a broad agenda, obviously, but I think also a great opportunity for business leaders to help shape a better new world of work coming out of the pandemic. So that's how we, in a nutshell, currently see the future of work agenda. and what we're currently working on with our partners.
I think that it's great. Thank you so much for that. And there are some real themes that we see again and again. And Peter touched on many of these as well. That yes, jobs are going to be replaced by automation, but more jobs will be created. And so we've got that net positive, which I think is just fantastic. That the workforce of the future is going to have to really focus, or management of the future really have to focus on reskilling and education and continual evolution of the workforce and skilling and upskilling the workforce. That remote work and hybrid work is going to be a real trend that we'll continue to see. This is not just a one-off as a result of COVID. This is something that we're going to see. We'll see more open talent, as you said, more contractors, a big focus on well-being, especially related to remote workers, because they're not in the office every day. We don't get to see them the whole time. New styles of leadership, and then diversity and inclusion. So lots of things there to unpick, which is great. So thank you very much. Let me talk to let me ask Nicola to introduce herself and talk a little bit about what she's seeing in a large enterprise like HP. Do you recognize those trends, Nicola? And are there any there that you can sort of pick out and bring to life for us?
Yes, thank you, Barry. Hello, everyone. Indeed, that is the case. Hewlett-Packard Enterprise is one of those large, more traditional employers, if you like. My role as a human resources leader is to work very closely with the business, but now we bring closer all other functions, be it real estate, be it legal, be it health services, in order to see how this future of work comes to life every day. My scope is for Central Eastern Europe. Russia, Turkey, and Africa is a region of 10 countries where we have presence, but we do work very remotely and already in a very, let's say, I call it a 3D matrix. Our company, being operating in more than 50 countries, more than 200 sites, 60,000 employees plus, had to very quickly go into a remote setup. Mind you that our business is actually to provide digital solutions and cloud-enabled services to customers. So COVID did bring us a challenge, but at the same time, a business opportunity. So we needed really to react fast and not to lose any business momentum. And what we see now, over the past months, we have been quite engaging on looking at how we're going to translate this opportunity or all the work, the effort we put to work remotely and so quickly, efficiently with the right infrastructure and the systems, how we're going to turn it in an opportunity for the future, and how this is actually forcing us, pushing us in a positive direction to bring more flexibility to the resources and the skills we are looking for. In the past, you would have boundaries, in the geographical boundaries for jobs. You would have limitations in what opportunities you are offering your talents, where now that we have moved into this more virtual, remote world, these boundaries are dropping. You don't have them anymore. And it is up to the skills and the talents to take and leverage the opportunities. So we are very quickly, already for a few months now, moving into a new concept that we call edge to office. We are a company that offers on the edge cloud services. So edge to office is aligned with our vision, our business vision. And what we are saying is that anyone can work on the edge being your home, the cafeteria, the train, the bus, or even the office. And we are looking at a model where we have assessed that more than 80% of the jobs we have, which are knowledge-based mostly, not the manufacturing ones, can be at the edge. So we are incentivizing employees. We have a program we have launched, and we are now actually going live country after country in order to offer this opportunity for this edge working concept that is very flexible. From an HR perspective, though, this means that we need to make sure that our culture as the fabric of the organization will keep us together. we would need to make sure that this is how we are going to stick to our identity as a company, our brand, and keep the way of operating in a very productive, top performing organization, that this edge working would not impact the connectedness we have with our employees, and moreover their development and the skills we are looking to develop for the future.
Yeah, I really love the edge model, and it just made me think that, and I hadn't thought about this trend before, but we're actually seeing some talent trends following technology trends, and maybe that's obvious, and maybe I'm just being a bit slow to the party here. But you know, if you think of cloud delivery, we're seeing cloud talent models. You know, you think of as a service delivery of technology, we're seeing talent as a service, and we see edge computing, which is super interesting. We're now seeing edge from a working perspective as well. It's really interesting. Maybe we are seeing talent follow tech.
Could be.
Yeah, exactly. So so you've just given a brilliant example of having to get so many people working remotely, and then sort of almost celebrating that and supporting the way they work remotely. I want to ask Katja, what do you think about remote work and happiness? Because I hope you will introduce yourself in a second to the audience, but I love your title. I won't steal your thunder, but one of your titles is excellent. So yeah, over to you.
Thank you, Barry. Actually, I have lots of titles. I'm representing Answer Global, which are the leading industry leader in building global capability centers. We already built over 60 in many different regions, but also I'm a psychologist, I'm an HR head, and my favorite title is Chief Happiness Officer. I truly believe that happiness is something which is happiness at work and happiness at life, but it's something extremely important always, but especially now when actually, as you rightly said, people working remotely in a hybrid models, and actually we kind of realized that as before, as employers, we could build motivation, engagement in many different ways, like for example by beautiful offices, by the great events when people can meet together, by fruits in the office. Now we don't have it. Yeah, most of us actually work from home, or rarely we can see each other. We have limited way of shaking hands, and there is a lot of challenges. So that's why suddenly a lot of companies realized, and we as a leader in building those centers also believe truly that the culture is becoming very important. Organizational culture, the way of team are kept together, which is a lot of around relationships and results, also psychological resilience, and obviously how to make those teams productive and linked together. So a lot of new challenges, but also, as we all said, great opportunity as well to build on that and move it forward.
Yeah, no, great. Thank you very much. It's really, I find it really interesting. I think, people working for you can be equally as happy remotely as they can be in the traditional environment. I think it just takes a different way of leading them and managing them and motivating them. And it's something we're all going to have to get used to, because I personally don't believe we're ever going to be going back to this, full-time working in an office, work being somewhere you go, as opposed to being something you do. And I want to turn to Zanele, who also has, I think they're equal favorites in terms of my title that you have as well, because you have a great title. We've had a Chief Happiness Officer, and now we have something slightly different. So will you introduce yourself to our audience, Zanele, and tell them what your title is?
Sure. Thank you so much, Barry, for that. And to everyone on the panel as well for everything that they've shared so far. So I'm Zanele Njapha. I work with Tomorrow Today Global. That's a strategic insights firm. So we help clients make sense of the future, basically. So the trends that Aidan was going through, we would then come in to assist those particular clients to just sort of sense make that process through what those trends mean for them. And I think the title that you're talking about is the UnLearning Lady. So it's this idea of helping people to move from one way of doing things to another, because we want to become these learning organizations, but really what we sometimes struggle to do is that unlearning of some of the traits and some of the dogmas, I like to call them, that we've had in the past. So to answer your question then, Barry, around what kind of model we're going to see, and this is what we've been tracking as a team, and I think what most of us can look forward to. But as our keynote said, we don't want to put anything in stone, but it is really this hybrid model, because we've seen it work for us during 2020 in ways that we couldn't possibly imagine before. And now we've come to the place where we understand that there's a better way to work. Because previously what we've done, and you'll notice this, is that we've actually molded our lives around our work. So where you live, the car you buy, who you get married to, and so many very critical parts of your life have literally been molded around work. But what now is starting to happen, and I think this is really helping us to sort of leverage the gig economy and really get it going, is this idea that we can now take back some of that autonomy and really shape work around our lives and rewrite the scripts altogether. So that's one of the things that I'm finding really exciting. And hence at Tomorrow Today, we sort of propose this 2-3-2 model, where it's 2 days at the office, 3 days anywhere in the world, and then 2 days of the weekend. So we're not married to that, but it's just sort of to put out the idea that that's the kind of model we're looking at, something that's very flexible. And I mean, if you look at Microsoft's remote work policy, literally just can be summed up into 6 words. It's that flexibility that we've noticed people are looking for, and they're definitely going to get. And I think open talent is what is going to allow that to happen. And then the last thing, Kasha, you touched on this, is the idea of culture that also brings in the autonomy, is that cultures where we're starting to build cultures where we hold on tightly to our outputs rather, and not necessarily to identities of individuals. Now, I'm not saying it's less people-centric, because we know that people drive business, and that's a huge conversation around purpose and everything else. But a lot of organizations are really going to need to start to remodel some of their policies, some of their business models, so that they hold on tightly to their outputs. But this flexibility around, I know I'm going to see John in the office, or Mary is going to do that for me, really needs to start to filter away.
Yeah, really, really interesting. I totally agree with that. I'd not come across the 2-3-2 model before, and I really liked that. I could see that working. I think organizations often need a policy around this thing, and could see them embracing something like a 2-3-2. We will definitely have this hybrid working model, I'm sure, going forward. One of the things that I think is interesting, and I'm not necessarily addressing this at any one of the panel, so if you have an answer, please just respond. But I wonder whether we will see increased mobility in the workforce as a result of this changing dynamic. We're not having to go into the office as much. We are likely to be freelancing more than we are just traditional employees. And so therefore, we don't necessarily have to live in big cities. And we might just decide, therefore, to travel much more, because as long as we've got an internet connection and a device, we can add value to the organizations that we work with. So do you think, as the general population, we will become more mobile as a result of these trends? I mean, does anybody want to respond to that? Otherwise, I'm going to pick Aidan, because I want to understand what the World Economic Forum think about that.
Yeah, I'm happy to offer an initial response and then hand over to the others. I think definitely, I mean, we are going to see major changes in workforce location. And again, we covered this as part of our future jobs survey, and I think the response was that 38% of companies expect to actually change the locations that they operate over the next 5 years. One big trend, I think, would be a move away from prime city centre real estate towards, more kind of a hub and spoke office model. But then I think the other big thing is that you would see as companies kind of moving towards a model where you have a lot of people in hybrid and some in fully remote. So I think Salesforce the other day just announced that they're going to have, for the majority of their workforce, something approaching the 2-3-2 model that Zanele just mentioned. Then a smaller proportion working fully remote, and then even smaller proportion having to be in the office all the time for the roles that really require it. It's not a huge stretch to imagine, I think, that those fully remote roles could actually be outsourced at some point. Not least because companies seem to be struggling. This is something we're hearing from a lot of the CHROs we work with. They're really struggling with the tax implications of having a work from anywhere model. So if you can kind of shift that problem onto someone else, that could be an attractive solution. Yeah,
exactly. That does raise so many questions, doesn't it? If you're a mobile workforce, you could be traveling in one location, living theoretically in another where you're paying tax, carrying out work for organizations in another around the world. Maybe we need to rethink the whole model. It's got so many implications. So, and then the last question I wanted to ask on the whole future of work before I move into sort of global business services and outsourcing is all around training and development. I think it's so great to see such a focus on upskilling, reskilling, and professional and personal training and development that, let's face it, I mean, certainly in my 20 years in work, we didn't see previously, right? Training was a bit of an afterthought. You had a career, you were a whatever, I was a technology consultant, and that was it. I'd gone to university, I'd got my degree. I didn't really do much more training after that, really, unless I really asked for it. And now I think that the tide is turning, and we will see so much more focus on professional development, reskilling, developing the workforce to stay ahead of the machines. And I think personally, I think that's a really, really positive thing. But and Zanele, maybe I can come to you on that. Am I right? Do you think that's going to be a real focus, and how will it be done in a remote world?
Absolutely, that's a great question. But I think that the question that a lot of organizations are going to start asking themselves is, how much accountability do we really have to a workforce that is so complex, right? And if you think about how companies generally approach their learning, it's because we have this workforce that we understand we have a certain accountability towards. So I think that that's going to be one of the biggest drivers around how we approach education and training and development needs going forward. Another really important thing here is that education is actually one of the biggest trends that are driving this training, the talent revolution rather. So we're seeing this spike in self-directed learning. And I think that this is what we're going to see a lot more. So this sense of autonomy is then going to come back to the employee of the future to say, what am I doing? Because I've now sort of taken my employment into my own hands, and more so going forward, what am I doing to then ensure that I'm staying ahead of the pack? And that burden, we're going to start to see it coming a little bit more and more off organizations, especially now. I mean, experiential learning, MOOCs are really doing the rounds. And I think that this is definitely where we're picking up some of the curves are going to be.
Yeah, no, I think, and Peter mentioned micro qualifications, and I think, we see a trend for micro internships. I'm on the board of a university, and we're talking about micro internships. I see technology playing such an important role. But I want to move on to focus on the future of outsourcing. There'll be a lot of people who have dialed in today who are in the outsourcing industry and interested in what that means. Well, let me say the global business services and outsourcing industry. And I said at the beginning of the call when I opened that I really see both recruitment, consulting, outsourcing all being disrupted. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I think there'll be really positive outcomes as a result of the role open talent and digital platforms can play within each of those three industries. And Anthony, if I can come to you and get you to introduce yourself to the audience in a second, but we see workflow, workplace, and workforce all being disrupted by digital technology and open talent. What do you think the impact will be on global business services, which I know is an area you're very familiar with?
Absolutely. Hi, Barry, and our panelists and all our attendees. And my name is Anthony Raja Devidas, and I'm the Managing Director for Pasol Kelly, and also part of the Deputy Chair for the Outsourcing Malaysia, or OM, they call it, a part of the National Tech Association here. So the three W's, as you would say: workflow, workplace, and workspace, right? I would say from a workflow perspective, I use an acronym, ABCD, easy to remember. I think some of you might be familiar. Automation or artificial intelligence, B for blockchain, C for cybersecurity content, and D for data science. Now, easy to remember and easy to recall, and look at the evolution of the BPO industry, right? From BPO, ITO, KPO, and moving into the GBS side. And now, with this last 13 months, it has now switched to digital GBS, right? So this switch has helped accelerate automation, robotics, as you earlier indicated, I think, Barry, in the day when you started off this session. How are these practically being applied in these organizations? Be it language, be it processes, the type of functional processes we're talking about. And the more adoption of digitization and digitalization has come into play. So workflow now has become accelerated, which is now helping. If you are a provider, it's helping your users. And if you are a user, it's making you more efficient for captive shared services. So this is particularly addressing the industry on both sides. And it's becoming one of the fastest growing industries in the world. And in fact, by far, that's the industry which is hiring the most number of people in the last 12 to 13 months, when everybody else is slowing down. So that advantage from a workflow perspective has brought in the advantage throughout the organization. From a workplace perspective, let me share with you that infrastructure, productivity, and flexibility, these aspects have become a priority for companies. And if you are able to deploy the GBS solution, keeping in mind cybersecurity, I know we touched on cybersecurity, which is a big concern. Privacy is a big concern. Data protection is a big concern. So imagine if you are co-living in a house, or if you're a family member, and if you're taking calls next to each other, what kind of privacy and protection do you have to support some of these? And we need to make sure that from an infra and side is taken care. But at the same time, productivity. The productivity has dramatically changed. The definition and the outcome of it has changed in the last 13 months. How do we look at it? The last one I wanted to just share with you on flexibility, right? And I think our fellow panelists have highlighted flexibility, and that comes along with how do you understand the family ecosystem and the work ecosystem? How are you able to kind of, I wouldn't say just balancing it, appreciating the integration that's happening at the same time. Last but not the least, on workforce. We have all the type of workforce, and we have been talking all throughout the session today. You have the independent contractors, you have the third parties, you have the temporaries, you have the contracts, you have the permanents, and of course the gigs, right? And all of them put together, today, what I will say is, I think the thought is people over jobs, right? And there's a reason why I'm saying that, because jobs will be displaced, because the type of positions and the demand, the industry is going to make the shift, will displace these jobs, but new jobs will be created. But we have to prioritize people. That's why I'm saying people over jobs. And I think that will help us ensure there is productivity and performance and results. Yeah. Back to you, Barry.
Yeah, thank you very much. Great answer. I showed a slide at the beginning, which I call the talent balance, which is more as what you were describing, right? All of the different types of talent supply, which enterprises are trying to balance and to orchestrate to meet their objectives. It's really interesting to me that I think there's a role for global business services to play more of that orchestration role, actually. And as we see GBS becoming, more of an influencer, more of a strategic function in sort of GBS 2.0, I see them being able to play that orchestration role, influencing where demand goes into which source of supply. Pavel, I want to come to you and talk a little bit about business services. Do you see business services generally being transformed by open talent, being influenced by open talent, being big users of open talent? And my second part of the question is are we just at the very beginning? Is it really early days and it's going to get much bigger, or are we further down the line than that? What's your perspective?
Barry, thank you very much. Let me introduce myself, Pavel Panchi, representing ABSL, the largest and CE organization representing outsourcing industry. Thank you for the questions, and it's to answer them, I should have a glass bowl, but we can already see some signals. So yes, in Poland, which is the largest market in CEE and largest and fastest growing, we create 30,000 new jobs every year, which comes down to 2,500 jobs a month and 82 jobs a day. With these numbers, you clearly see that on one hand, being mobile or being online, on the other, not being able to function regularly, go to the recruitment meetings or onboardings, you have to change the model. So yes, the model is changing. More and more often, we hear that companies are introducing in their contracts with the employees clause that once was a game changer from Twitter, and you will never have to work from the office again. Yes, maybe it doesn't happen that often, that it's not again or never more, but the companies are saying, okay, once a month we would like to see you in our office, but the office these days will be a place of creative thinking, will be a place of transferring the DNA of the company, of showing the corporate culture and proving the quality of leadership. Because once you see your boss or your colleague for 2 days, that person will have to prove that he or she is capable of being a leader in the new situation. And that will be a big test. And is it the beginning? Yes, but these companies, or the same companies that have started putting this clause, you will never have to work in the office again, not only started recruiting in small towns and villages where they have people that probably because of their mindset would never move 50 miles away from where they used to live 18 or 20 years. They don't have to move. They can do whatever they like within the circle of family and friends. The same companies started hiring across borders. And now you mentioned one thing that may be a showstopper, but for a short time, taxes. No one would like to lose the taxes, allowing people to work without the control. But the push is so hard that we think that, okay, in Europe, it will be the politicians in Brussels. In London, you don't have to look at them anymore, but you'll have your own in the city. These politicians will have a drive to control it. But once it becomes an open talent economy, it will also become an open tax economy. What we will have to remember is to make sure that these people that initially will fall into this carousel of finding jobs anywhere, they will be guaranteed security, stability of these jobs, benefits, and simple things that right now are in the contract with one employer. Once we start working, in 50 different places, we have to organize that life so we do not wake up, 30 years later, not having a social security and being afraid of going to the dentist. So a positive and a negative, but keeping these two in our heads, we can build the future. Thank you, Barry.
Really, really good answer, and really, really interesting. You raised so many good points there. It reminded me, as you were talking of there's a company called Turing.com. You may have heard of Turing. It came out of Silicon Valley, just got their Series B in investment, a technology services company that uses AI to screen their candidates and to train their candidates. They have 180,000 people on their books now, and they only provide technology services, 100 different disciplines. And only the best 1% of candidates they interview pass their rigorous AI-based testing. But they are competing with the global systems integrators, the global service providers, the outsourcers in the world, with a distributed global workforce of 180,000, representing the top 1%, so they say. And once you have you've passed the Turing test, you will always be guaranteed a job with Turing, but you'll never have to go to a client site. You can travel around the world doing whatever you like, right? And typically you won't be employed, but you'll always have a job available for you that you'll get paid for. This, to me, is the future of a disruptive force that will change the way we think about suppliers and outsourcing service providers. And I think it's a good segue into the next sort of focus of the topic for me, which is, do you think the whole open talent world is an opportunity or a challenge to outsourcing service providers? And I'm not addressing this at anybody in particular. So please just shout if you'd like to respond to that before I pick somebody. But so I see Nicola's hand go up, which is great. Thank you, Nicola. So yeah, so is it an opportunity or a challenge for outsourcers?
Well, thank you, Barry. I felt I pressed the buzzer quick, so this is good. So I think there is opportunity both sides. If we can say there is a side of the traditional employer, the large enterprise, and then the service providers. I see an opportunity from a traditional employer style to say, okay, I can now offer my employees the flexibility, the agility, the right sense of belonging, not by holding someone 9 to 5 in the office, but really giving them freedom, flexibility, have a good work-life balance, figure out in an autonomous way the way they best produce the best of them. Yeah. And on the other hand, though, I see the opportunity that the service providers can kind of do the same and then offer even more talent in a more flexible way to us traditional employers, that because we used to see a bit of a not so flexible availability of the talent that we were looking for, and not so much different from the talent we engage and hire on our own. So
Yeah.
I think there is an opportunity both sides, as long as we really grasp the momentum and let the past to the past and look really in a visionary way for the future.
Yeah, I think you can end up with a blended model. You could have traditional delivery models that the outsourcers have been doing for a long time, alongside virtual, open talent, flexible, agile models. I think that the same as we've said for outsourcing with your answer, same can be said for consulting as well. I think.
Yes.
I see that industry ripe for change. Does anybody else have a perspective on that, whether it's a positive or a negative, an opportunity or a challenge for outsourcing?
Maybe Barry, I can.
Yeah.
This with majority of the GBS companies, what we are seeing right now is a review or a change in the business models, right? And I think you're familiar with nearshore, best shore kind of models and so on that we have been operating all the time. And right now, there's no show to talk about. You're basically, you're talking about universal positioning, and you can be from anywhere and exactly supporting anywhere. And it's become one global market for the business, right? I think someone is commenting about right show as well. So so we are engaging the audience. So I foresee that with the change of the business model and with the availability of the new approach to work, workplace, workspace, worker mindset, and all of that put together, especially with the new trend of of course, the future of work is accelerating that. I believe there will be more acceptable approach from a GBS perspective. And there would also be a lot of consolidation, and M&A is taking a place around the world in this space, because you don't need to be the world's largest employer anymore.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Yeah, and right, Barry, right? Because we are talking about the size of the employee base, no more. I think it's more about making sure that your core is what is going to differentiate you, and however, the access to talent is going to become the powerful differentiator.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, and it always used to be the day that the big outsourcing companies would publish their quarterly results and their revenue and their EBITDA, but also their headcount growth. And those days are gone, right? Because the focus is on non-linear growth, being able to do more with less, and automation and AI and cloud enable them to do that. And so does the advent of open talent. So I think you had a really good point there. So
maybe just one more thing I wanted to add. I'm also seeing one more thing, that there will be reduction in long-term employment, or those who seek that as. Am I right, Barry?
No, sorry, just making sure I understood. Did you say there won't be a reduction in full-time employment?
There will be. There will be a reduction in long-term employment. That's by choice of individuals who are choosing to go into the gig side of the environment, and as well as the organizations are also looking at more versatile workforce, right? So, and that means that the flexible workforce will be the choice as we go through, and the reduction in the long term. So that way you have another component to think about, that in order to attract a talent who you need to offer a lot of varieties to stay connected, and GBS can do that as an industry. Across the board, we can provide the skills, the learning, the functional, the digital aspects. Everything can be done in one whole organization, managing an entire world, in many ways.
One of the parallels that I always like, I can't remember where I first read it, was the workforce of the future may emulate the way film production works. And so if you're delivering a film, you're creating the next James Bond film, the film set will be full of electrical experts, production experts, design experts, creative experts. They'll all be freelancers, and they come together on the film set to deliver an amazing project. And then they disperse and go away and work on the next project. And I think we'll see a lot of talent and projects in the workforce being delivered like that. I think it's really, really interesting analogy. Now we've, my last question, because we've only got three minutes left, is just a sort of a macro question. I know not everybody will be able to answer, but really interesting last week in the UK that Uber drivers took their case to the Supreme Court, and they won, and they will now be classed in the UK as employees because they felt that Uber controlled when they work, how they work, where they work, how much they got paid, and so they should be treated like employees. And it's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out in terms of gig work generally. I personally don't think it's going to have a significant impact on gig work in the enterprise. Most organizations are not online staffing, they're the other types. And I think it's a different level of skill, and organizations are typically limited companies or sole traders who market their own services and have control of their own destiny to a certain extent. But do you think legislation will change? Will it stop open talent becoming adopted, or prevent it, slow it up, or will we see legislative change? Anyone want to jump in on that one?
I think there will be a clash of the titans, because both the business would like to have the legislation on their side and the employees. We all are thinking about the whole situation of open talent very positively, but we have to be aware that there may be a certain earthquake. For example, financial institutions, they are not that much open to the open talent because they need the continuity. The open talent may also mean that people will be able, not only willing, but also able to change their jobs much more often, and we mentioned that. So how does that influence the safety, HPE, safety of your projects that you have, and you have to count on people. If, you know, all of a sudden someone new starts recruiting and then you lose your teams. So I would say the business will be first active in the advocacy role, trying to organize it according to their way. But of course, Uber drivers show that there will be a bounce back and a reaction or counter reaction. So there will be, I would say, 3 to 5 years of uncertainty on the legal market, but then it will stabilize.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good answer. And on that very good answer, I'm going to draw things to a close because we've reached the end. It's 10:06 in the UK. And I just want to say a huge thank you to all of our panelists. You've been great, and I'm sorry if I didn't get to everybody as much as I would like to have done. There's just so much to discuss. And I also want to say a big thank you before I hand over to Kerry to conclude things, to all of our speakers this afternoon. It's just been fantastic. We've seen so many different aspects of the open talent economy, and have had so many of the great and the good of the open talent world join us that I've just been so incredibly impressed with all of the thought leadership that they've provided. So huge thank you to everybody at the Global Technology and Business Services Council for organizing things so well.